Welcome to Tough Talk. I'm your host, Paul Taros, and today my guest is Sean O'Mara. He is seeking to obtain his master's as a physician assistant. A former chef with a culinary degree from Mott Community College, Sean is interested in the relationship between agriculture and health. With rising healthcare costs and heart disease and obesity more prevalent than ever, Sean would like to focus his attention on preventable medicine and community outreach. Though not an expert, he hopes to bring up conversations, raise questions, and learn as much as he can before he enters the medical field. Welcome, Sean.
Thank you, Paul.
So what is preventable medicine?
Preventable medicine is the field of study where instead of treating an illness after it happens, it's doing everything you can, whether it's exercise, diet, even meditation, to where these things don't occur later on.
So our diet can prevent certain diseases?
Absolutely. So some of the biggest killers in America right now, heart disease, diabetes, even certain types of cancers. These are all preventable. Some of these, like cancers, are natural causes, natural flows of life. However, with heart disease and diabetes, these are totally preventable through diet and exercise.
Okay. Now, when I walk through the grocery store, so much of the store is processed food.
Mm-hmm.
Would you recommend trying to change that, or?
So the old saying goes, always go around the outside of the grocery store. The outside of the grocery store is your produce, it's your meats, your bakery section. However, the bakery section now even has become a little bit, I go through there, it's all sweet rolls and it's breakfast pastries. But if you stick with the fruits, vegetables, and the lean proteins, you should be good. And the reason with the processed foods now, it's interesting you bring that up, is that's where agriculture comes in. So we were looking into this, and what are the biggest crops in America? Soy, wheat, corn. How much of that do you really eat, do you think? You don't have a big plate of soy or a big plate of wheat. So what's happening is our system is a little bit upside down, where we're really pushing these, what they're called monoculture, and these cash crops. That's all we're focusing on. And so what's happening now is that we're getting cheap, plentiful calories, but they're not exactly calories that are good for us. So if you look on a box of any of this processed food, most of it is the exact same thing that are just repackaged over and over again. What's in a burrito might also be in a frozen pizza or anything else. So we're gonna have to change that, because instead of what used to happen was, we used to have a diverse agriculture. You planted spinach, you planted rutabagas. What's happened now is farmers have gone in and they're planting one crop. That's it, because they can get insurance against it. The silos, everything, the transportation, it's all built around this monoculture. And so what we need to change that to is smaller rural farms that are diversified and that are feeding the people directly. So that's where processed food and going around the grocery store, it all sort of goes together like that. And it's something we really have to get away from, policy-wise and with our own dollars that we're spending at the store.
So if we start diversifying the crops,
yep.
Are we going to still be able to feed the same number of people? I mean, not only Americans, but we do a lot of exporting of our food around the world.
Absolutely, we do. So the interesting thing about that is feeding. Who are we feeding right now with all of our corn? We're feeding a lot of animals. We're doing ethanol. What some people have advocated for is turning some of those fields into, again, more diverse plantings. A lot of our food also is wasted. Estimates have said that 40% or more of all of the food that we produce is wasted. So it's not a problem of space, It's more of a problem of how does it get to you and how do we use it after it's produced. So I do believe, based on what we've read and who I've talked to, is that we can feed people with diverse crops, and we'd be a lot healthier for it.
So you said 40%, up to 40% of our food is wasted. How does it get wasted?
So one thing is, if you go to any restaurant, I used to work in senior living, also in catering. A lot of that food at the end of the night, you can't reuse. It's just thrown out. And think of it at your house. How much food do you, if it goes bad? Just yesterday I had a melon. I didn't end up using it for one reason or another. It's thrown out. And I'm just one household. Imagine your neighborhood, your county, and then keep going on that. It really adds up. But a lot of it also is like with food service industry, and it just gets thrown out, unfortunately.
So in those instances, how can you save that food? I mean, if you have a melon in your fridge and you don't eat it, it's going to go bad and you are going to throw it out, right?
Yep, it's going to take a little bit of discipline. We've tried, what we've started to do is shop more frequently, so you're not getting that excess buildup. Right now my fridge is pretty slender right now, but it's like because I keep going out and I'm having to get fruits and vegetables, which they do go bad more quickly than frozen and processed foods, but they are better for you. So I think it's just going to take discipline on our behalf.
Okay. Why does it seem like fruits and vegetables are so much more expensive than a Big Mac?
And that was something I wanted to bring up. So yesterday I got a head of broccoli, $3. And then you pass through a McDonald's, a McDouble is less than $2. And that's something we are going to have to fix. And part of it is we just don't place an emphasis on fruits and vegetables in America. Let's be honest, what's more satisfying to eat? It's the fatty, salty McDouble over the head of broccoli. But if in return, later on, the life of McDoubles leads me to diabetes and heart disease, that's going to be a lot more expensive than that $3 head of broccoli. So something that policy-wise we might have to change is how we view our farmers. We're always talking, they're the ones that are feeding us, and I think they should be a viable part of our healthcare system and our healthcare debate. So part of it might be having to get more young people into it, and that would help. If you go to some of these farmers markets, you can find good, affordable produce. And it's going to take a lot of young farmers to get into it, and when all of these farmers work together, I believe the prices will come down. But right now that McDouble is cheap because it's just the way our policies are, and that needs to change.
Okay. Well, I know, these, and I don't want to pick on McDonald's, but fast food hamburgers, I've always heard it referred to as pink slime, that, they're getting the remnants of the meat off these bones and dousing them with chemicals and processing it so much. And that's how, their basic ingredients are almost nil because they would have been thrown out anyways.
Yeah, so
So that's how they're driving these costs down for these hamburgers. Can something like that be done with, and I'm not suggesting dousing these vegetables with chemicals, but how can we bring down the
cost? Okay, so, and it's interesting that you bring up chemicals because that's been a real focal point of what I've wanted to study. Is for millennia, people have been farming. That's just what they did before industry and everything else came in. How did they farm back then? It wasn't with chemicals. It wasn't with natural or petrochemical fertilizers. It was with natural, plant-based biology. And so an interesting thing they've come up with, there's something called the Rodale Institute, R-O-D-A-L-E. And they're at the big forefront of trying to go back to how things used to be. So instead of spraying your field with pesticide, instead of spraying your fields with fertilizers, which is easy and it does save the farmer time. I mean, I'm not going to deny that the America of today produces more food per farmer and per acre than ever before in human history. However, we might have gone too far. And so by that I mean the petrochemicals, the monoculture being only planting one crop at a time on hundreds, thousands of acres. This might have gone too far, Paul. And what we want to go back to is a time where we're using biology. And whether you believe in evolution or you believe in God as a creator, there's something up there or around us that created this system that works. And so if you look at it that way, what we were looking at as a team is, and when I say team, when we were in culinary school, was how can we create a farm system where we're using compost, where we're using animals and plants side by side, cover crops, crops that you'll grow in the off years to actually replenish the soil with the nitrogen and the potassium and everything else that you would be using with petrochemicals. So there is a way to do this efficiently, safely. It's just people have to get used to it. It is not as easy as just spraying your field with chemicals or fertilizers. It does take work, but the results have shown that they can get as much production out of a natural-based, biologically sound plantings as they can out of the one that is chemicals. And you can actually make more money that way too.
Okay, I was reading a Consumer Report article the other day that talked about sweet bell pepper.
Okay.
That one grown in the U.S. has very high levels of pesticides, and one grown in Mexico is very high in pesticides. Shouldn't we be concerned about these pesticides that are being, on our fruits and vegetables?
They're starting to realize that because if you really think about it, we've only been doing this for, less than a century. And so now reports are starting to come in about how this may affect our health. I'm not sure if there's any definitive work. I can't speak to that, but I do know based on what I've been reading is it is affecting things. And also insect populations are going down. And is that good? There was a bee scare a couple years ago. Is it reflective of our use of pesticides? We need these we need these insects to help pollinate, and then our health is affected. It's really a kind of it's an interesting thing, and I'm interested to see how it proceeds in the next couple decades.
Okay. You talked about cattle. We're also, pumping these cattle full of steroid hormones to increase their growth rate, and that's getting into our food supply. And, I think that's of a concern also.
It is. The biggest thing we're finding, like I said, is we seem to be going away from what has naturally been working for millennia. And I think this is the fact, we are a land of plenty in America. Agribusiness has done a wonderful job of producing bountiful, affordable, if not cheap, calories. Now the studies are coming in and saying, was this what was best for us as humans? So yes, we're getting the cheap calories, but on the other end, we are literally spending tens of billions of dollars every year on diabetes and heart disease, and we're using resources that could be used in other ones like dementia care or cancer research. But instead we're spending billions of dollars over here on things that were preventable. And to me that doesn't sound economically sound.
Okay. Earlier off camera, you were talking about how hospitals are starting to grow their own food. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
So next year I'm going to be volunteering with Henry Ford West Bloomfield in their metabolic health unit. And it's a growing field, and they are basically focused on preventative medicine. Now there was a Cranes article that came out a couple years ago, and they were talking about how if your hospital 10, 20, 15 years ago had a McDonald's, a Subway, a franchise, you were a big deal. Well, now they're starting to see that that's not a good thing. So now they're going the exact opposite, and they're starting to grow their own food. So Henry Ford West Bloomfield has a greenhouse that they use to help grow food for their cafeteria, for their patients. So it is grown, you know exactly what's going into that food, and so you can give that to your patients knowing with sound mind that that is what's best for them.
Now, when they grow their vegetables, are they using any type of pesticides on that?
Have not gone into there yet. So I know about what they're doing, but I'm not sure exactly how, but in a couple of weeks I hope to find out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And so are more and more hospitals doing that?
I believe so, yeah. So when I read the Cranes article, they are starting to do that more and more, and it is starting to become a mindset. Because like I said, if you can, eat your vegetables now to prevent a lot of health bills later, that's going to be a great thing. Not only for the patient, but also for the healthcare system. We can allot those resources to things that are more pressing at that time.
Okay. Now, do you think there's a danger of, the status quo right now? Large companies are making a lot of money. They're to disrupt it. I mean, it's going to be a lot of, if not, resistance. Wouldn't there be from these large food processors?
There will be. And they're already starting to. I mean, you can see it with Cargill, Monsanto, and the interesting thing about food is unlike any of the other, I shouldn't say that in absolute terms, but farmers markets are a wonderful advocate for what's called community-supported agriculture, CSAs. Now, I can go at the beginning of the year and plop down several $100s to, let's say Farmer Jane, and say, I'm going to give you this so that you, throughout the summer, can give me what you're growing. A big company's not going to stop that. We're already finding out more and more that people are starting to wake up to that, and they are wanting farm to table at their restaurant. They are wanting farm to table at their farmer's market. If you go into Whole Foods, they're always, showing off what local vendor this came from. But we have to do it more. Our dollars are going to speak more than anything, and it is already starting to turn that way. Now, when we talk about big companies, we think maybe in food production or food distribution. Gordon, Cisco's, what people are starting to do now, and in Chicago especially. For a day I went out and volunteered on a farm called Spence Farm, and it's 2 hours south of Illinois. And what they did was they looked around and they said, we have all these farmers that, they're not doing their fullest potential. They are organic farmers, they're doing what we believe is right, but there's no economic viability. So what Gordon's does, or what Kroger does, or any food distribution, and how we've come to know it, is they just take from this farm, this farm, this farm, and sell it. So what they did at Spence Farm is said, hey, we're going to get all these different people together, we're going to group up, and then we're going to have a channel up to Chicago. So I believe they have over 200 chefs, restaurants now, that they call up, at the beginning of the season, say, hey, what's your menu is going to look like? Well, I need rutabagas, I need turnips, I need this. Okay, perfect, we can do that for you. So now they've almost become a co-op that has become their own food distribution, and every week they say, hey, I need this, I need this, I need this. The farmers get it together and then ship it directly up to Chicago. Wouldn't that be great if we could do that in Metro Detroit? And the interesting thing about that is young people are starting to go back. Do you know what the average age of a farmer in America is?
I do not.
It's around 57. Where's that going to go? People are leaving small towns because there's no jobs, because agriculture has now gone from this big, labor-intense production to you only need a couple farmers and a GPS tractor, which was good. I'm not saying that any of this was bad at the time, but now we're stepping back and saying, was it best for what we need now? So farmers under the age of 35, and this was in the, I want to say, Wall Street Journal, I read this, is actually growing. Farmers under the age of 35 is growing for the second time only in a century. People with college degrees, too. Over 60% of these new farmers have college degrees. So people of my generation are starting to go back, and they said in the article, there's no benefits, the pay's not as good, but I'm more fulfilled. And I know that I'm helping people. And now I've gotten way off topic, but this is the kind of stuff that gets me excited, because we're starting to see these we're starting to see these modes of production really come in, and people are really starting to take notice. So when you ask me, are big businesses going to get disrupted? Yeah. But a lot of businesses are being disrupted right now, and it's going to be interesting to see if we can actually keep that going to where we are healthier, we're more environmentally friendly. That's the other thing with all the chemicals. Right now there's nitrogen runoff. Have you ever heard of this? Nitrogen runoff, they're creating dead zones in the Gulf of Mexico. So because of a farm in Illinois or Missouri or anything along the Mississippi River, all this nitrogen runs off into the Mississippi, into the Gulf of Mexico, creating dead zones, no oxygen. Well, that's not good for the Louisiana shrimp farmers. I mean, if we had a dead zone in, say, Lake Huron because of runoff from Canada, we'd be up in arms. And so we need to stop this, and there are natural ways that can produce products that are more nutritious, as plentiful as using chemical fertilizers, and the farmers can make more money because the consumer. Again, it's more intensive. I need to know that if I grow this spinach or if I grow these potatoes that I'm going to sell it. But it's been proven time and time again that they can make more money per acre doing this natural, biologically sound farming than you can with monoculture and chemical fertilizer for farming.
Okay. Now you mentioned pesticide runoff into our water system. Isn't there also? I mean, you have some farmers who are growing organic produce. The farm next door might be spraying pesticides, and you have spray that's getting over into the organic farmer. So
exactly, and it's how do we draw the line? And that was part of the other reason too, where it's almost all these farms kind of group together and they build off of each other. Yeah, I don't know what to say about the pesticides. I know they do that with, that you hear the stories about Monsanto, about how they're genetically modified seeds. Now, again, that's not, I hate saying it like that, but it's not necessarily a bad thing because they're doing things in, drought areas in the Middle East that they were never able to do because of genetically modified crops. But however, how is it right that, just because a couple seeds or, your patented pesticide got into my field, that somehow I'm liable now? I don't know. And then the organic thing you bring up, it's true. How do we go against what's happening out there with pests? I really don't know. It's a good question.
Well, and again, on pesticides, I mean, some pesticides can be washed off if you wash them, but some of them are drawn up into the vegetable or fruit through the roots, and they're, in the fruit or vegetable itself and can't be washed off. They're just in there.
Yeah. And another interesting thing you bring up about that is everything that's in the soil, and we need to start thinking that way too, is drawn up into the fruit or the vegetable. The soil is a living thing. We don't think of it like that. We think of it as just a sterile environment. It is a living thing that needs feeding. It needs compost. It needs manure. It needs all these, decomposting natural material. But so many farmers are out there, and that's because they were raised that way, and that's because that's the way that policy has been pushed, is that we are creating this sterile environment, and we're adding to. Think of it like your human body. I can either put carrots and vegetables and apples into me so that I can heal myself and my body starts working, or I can start supplementing later on with prescription medication. Which one do you really want to do? I'd rather do the preventative, and that's what they're finding out with soil now, is it is a living organism that we need to curate. And so because all of those nutrients that go through that get into your fruits and vegetables. A tomato grown here is not the same tasting tomato that's grown in Florida. It can be two totally different things. That's why wine tastes different. A wine in California doesn't taste the same as wine in France. So soil does have something to do with it, and we're starting to realize now that we need to change the way we farm in order to keep that soil. I mean, yeah, we need to keep it because that's your livelihood. Why would you want to get rid of that? Or why would you want to contaminate it with all of those chemicals?
Well, you mentioned food tasting different in different parts of the country. I got to tell you, when I was in Greece, the salads over there were so much more flavorful, and I have no idea why, but I mean, they just tasted so much better than here. And again, I mean, maybe it's because, they're getting more locally sourced produce and getting to the, restaurant faster. I'm not sure, but it could be the soil over there. Whatever it is, I just always notice that, and I'll tell you, I wish I could get a salad that tastes that good over there, here.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, I mean, that's what they say about farmers markets too. I mean, if you go into Kroger and you pick up a tomato, that's one thing. But if you go to a tomato that was just picked out of a farmer's field, it's going to taste a lot different. It's which one do you want to pay for and which one's more healthy. And they have shown time and time again that the one out of the farmer's field that actually takes time to curate his field, that one's going to be more nutritious for you. You're going to get a lot more nutrients for your bang or for your buck, I guess. So why wouldn't we want to do that?
Okay. We just have a few more minutes left. Are there any major points you'd like to bring up?
So things that we can do as consumers. That's the biggest thing. How does this affect you as the consumer? A big thing I could say is CSA, community supported agriculture. Go to your local farmer's market, make friends with your farmer, because again, they're the ones that are feeding you and making you healthy. So put up the money every year and say, I'm going to give you such and such money. And they usually have such a deal made out with $500 for the season. And you will get whatever is fresh and in season that week. So that's one thing. Make friends with the farmer. Don't be afraid to go out. Most of them, most of the farmers that I've known are the nicest people. And so right now in this political climate, we want to talk about, really helping out those small communities. Farmers are the base of that community. And I think they need to be, upheld to a very high standard in our heads. And then put your money where your mouth is. If you really want to make a change, you're going to have to invest more time and invest more money into researching what's going to make us healthy as a country and as a person. It's good for the environment, it's good for communities, and it's good for you. It's just going to take a lot more discipline to get to that point. And that's really what I'd like to get across.
Okay. So it's kind of sounds like maybe the FDA isn't looking out for us?
I haven't gotten into it yet, but that's something that I would like to look into in the future. And if you need politicians to voice that to them, this is going to be a big crisis, and it's already starting to be. Diabetes and heart disease are preventable, and it's no joke, and it is a drain on our healthcare resources. We're talking about healthcare right now. We're talking about lifespans. So yeah, this really goes down to economics, policy, health. It's a very broad spectrum based on one principle, and that's sustainable agriculture.
Okay. Okay, well, I think we're going to leave it there.
Perfect.
So I want to thank you very much for taking time out to appear on the show.
I appreciate it, Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sean.